The folder was 3 inches thick. Wren Calloway had built it the way she built everything, methodically, without sentiment, with the particular precision of a woman who had learned that control was the closest thing to safety the world reliably offered. Every document in duplicate, every form signed in blue ink, every medical record sorted by date, then relevance, then the quiet desperation she refused to call by its real name. She was 36. A forensic architect, the kind hired to find what went wrong in buildings after the catastrophe, to read the structure's failure and name it clearly. She was very good at naming failure. She was less good at preventing it in her own life. The clinic was called Ashford Fertility, Beacon Street, Boston. She had chosen it for its success rates, its discretion, its proximity to her office. She had not registered the name on the door as anything significant. She would. The waiting room smelled of lavender and deliberate calm. Wren sat near the window, folder in her lap, and stared at her intake forms without reading a word. The doctors had been kind when they told her. That particular softness people deploy before permanently rearranging someone's life. One viable option remaining. Time-sensitive, success rates declining with each cycle. She had nodded, thanked them, driven home in silence, and opened her laptop because that was what she did when the ground cracked under her. She had researched. She had planned. The plan had led her here. She was reviewing page 2 of her intake forms when someone sat 2 chairs away. Tall, dark hair, slightly long. Gray jacket, no folder, no phone in hand, no armor of any visible kind. And he looked around the room with the open curiosity of someone who found even ordinary spaces genuinely interesting. He glanced at her. Not aggressive, not demanding. Something quieter than that. Closer to recognition. Wren looked back at her forms. Wren Calloway. A nurse appeared in the doorway. She rose immediately, grateful for somewhere to go. She was nearly through the door when the nurse spoke again. "Mr. Devereaux, same corridor, please." The man fell into step beside her. Unhurried, easy. "First time here?" he asked. "Yes." "You've been holding your breath since you sat down," he said simply. She stopped walking. He was right. She exhaled. He nodded once, as if that was the only thing he'd been waiting for, and kept moving. "Cole," he said, without looking back. "In case we end up in the same hallway again." She stood there 1 beat too long. She would need a new category for whatever had just shifted in her chest. She spent 4 days convincing herself it was purely logical. The lists helped. 2 columns, typed and printed, reviewed with the same rigor she applied to structural failure reports. Known donor versus anonymous. Control over medical history, developmental psychology, the statistical advantages of a child who could someday ask a real question and receive a real answer. Cole Devereaux's profile from the clinic's known donor inquiry matched every criterion she had built. She had also run a background check. Of course she had. Cole Devereaux, 39. Landscape architect and urban garden designer based in Seattle. Clean record. No litigation history, financially stable, and no heritable conditions flagged in his genetic panel. The kind of man who, when asked to describe his work, apparently said, "I try to build things that outlast me." She had read that line twice before closing the file. She called him on a Thursday morning. He picked up on the second ring. Devereaux. Just the last name, easy and unguarded. "This is Wren Calloway. We met at Ashford Fertility 4 days ago in the corridor." A pause, comfortable somehow. "I remember," he said. "I'd like to meet. I have a proposal." Trellis Cafe on Newbury Street. Saturday at 10. She arrived 7 minutes early, took a corner table, opened her laptop to a clean document, 12 points, structured like a brief, and told herself she was not watching the door. Cole walked in at exactly 10. He ordered black coffee without consulting the menu and came to her table without hesitation, the way a man does when he's decided not to be difficult about anything. She turned the laptop to face him. He read every line. He asked 2 questions, both precise, both legal, and then he looked at her over the screen. "Why me specifically?" he asked. She held his gaze. "Because you told me something true in a hallway when you had no reason to. I want that somewhere in my child." He was quiet for a long moment. "There's something you should know first," he said, "about why I registered." He told her about the baby he'd lost. His daughter 6 years ago, born too early, lived 4 days. His ex-wife, the winter that followed. How he'd registered at a clinic 3 months later because grief had needed somewhere to go. Wren listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Does that change your answer?" "No," he said. "It changes my reason, yes." She closed the laptop, picked up her coffee, did not allow herself to feel anything except the clean, logical satisfaction of a plan moving forward. She examined what she actually felt at midnight, alone in her apartment on Marlborough Street. It was not satisfaction. The paperwork took 2 weeks. It seemed straightforward. It was not. Wren's attorney, a precise woman named Sloane Merritt she'd used for contracts for 6 years, reviewed the known donor agreement with her characteristic thoroughness and flagged one unusual clause buried in subsection 4C, a data-sharing provision that allowed the clinic to retain donor information in a shared records network for quality and compliance purposes. "Standard boilerplate," Sloane said. "Most clinics use it." Wren signed anyway. The plan was moving. She signed. What neither woman knew: Ashford Fertility was not a simple private clinic. It was partially owned through a holding company registered in Delaware under the name Meridian Health Partners. And Meridian Health Partners had, for 3 years, been managing a quiet internal crisis. A data migration error that had caused donor records to be incorrectly cross-referenced across patient files. At least 11 cases affected. A class action developing in silence. The CEO of Ashford Fertility was a man named Desmond Holt. 61, silver-haired. The kind of man whose office had a view of the public garden and whose handshakes were very firm and whose entire professional identity rested on the word discretion. When the data error had been discovered internally, Desmond had made a decision. Contain it, compensate quietly, let the NDA do its work. He had not disclosed the error to patients. He had not disclosed it to the state medical board. He had fired the IT employee who found it and handed him a non-disclosure agreement and a check. That IT employee's name was Bishop Calloway, Wren's brother. Neither of them knew it yet. That they were on opposite ends of the same buried secret. Bishop had moved to Portland after the firing, quietly furious, and had said nothing to Wren because she had enough. Because he was waiting for a reason that felt large enough. He had kept the hard drive. In Boston, Wren underwent the procedure on a Monday. She drove herself. She went back to work the following morning. 6 weeks later, Dr. Priya Nair called with results that were exactly what the plan had called for. "You're pregnant," Priya said, with the warm precision of someone who had delivered this news hundreds of times and never found it routine. Wren sat in her office on Atlantic Avenue for a full minute, hand flat on her desk, looking at the Charles River through her window. Then she allowed herself, and for exactly 60 seconds, to feel something unplanned. Then she went back to work. He came back to Boston in October, Not for Wren, or not only, but for a landscape commission near the seaport that needed his eye on site for 2 weeks. He texted to let her know. She replied, "Noted. How's the project?" He smiled at the phone for longer than he intended. They met for coffee at Trellis again, by what both of them treated as coincidence, and neither entirely believed. She was 14 weeks along. She looked tired and focused and very much herself. She had not softened, but there was something around the edges of her that had shifted. A quality he couldn't name precisely, but recognized the way you recognize a key change in a piece of music. "You look well," he said. "I look like someone who's been working 60-hour weeks while also building a human," she said. "But thank you." He laughed. She almost did. They talked for 2 hours. About the Seaport project, about a library renovation she was managing in Cambridge, about the native plantings he was experimenting with in urban rooftop microclimates. About Marcus, for a moment, she'd asked, and he'd answered, because she was the kind of person who asked questions she actually wanted answers to. He also told her the rest of the story about his daughter, about Petra, his ex-wife, and the specific ice of that winter. How the loss had driven them apart rather than together, the way some griefs do, pulling instead of binding. How he'd emerged from it changed in ways he was still mapping. She wanted to try again immediately, he said. "I needed time." She called time a character flaw. He turned his cup on the table. "We were wrong for each other in ways the good years had hidden." Wren was quiet for a moment. "What was her name?" she asked. "Your daughter?" "June," he said. Wren looked at him. "That's a good name." "Yeah," he said softly. It was. Outside, October rain moved against the cafe windows. The city was doing what it always does, indifferent, alive, carrying everyone's story simultaneously without distinguishing between them. He did not touch her hand. She did not lean toward him. But something between them settled into a new position, like a load redistributed, and both of them felt it without naming it. He flew back to Seattle on Thursday. He thought about her the entire flight. Her full name was Petra Ashford Devereaux. She had kept the hyphen after the divorce, a strategic decision, not a sentimental one. The Ashford was useful. The Ashford was her father's name, her inheritance, her equity stake in a fertility clinic on Beacon Street that she had co-founded with her father 12 years ago, and that had grown, under Desmond Holt's management, into something her father would not entirely recognize. Petra was a trust and estate attorney. She was meticulous, she was patient, and she had the particular dangerous quality of a person who plans several moves ahead without telegraphing that she's playing at all. She had known Cole registered as a donor 18 months after their divorce. She had found it in the clinic system. Her access had never been revoked, or an administrative oversight she had never corrected, and she had sat with the information quietly. She had not interfered. She had simply monitored. When Wren Calloway's file came across the known donor application, Petra read it within 24 hours. She read it 3 times. Then she made 2 calls. The first was to Desmond Holt. She wanted to know the status of the data breach litigation. Desmond was evasive in the way of a man managing something that could end him. That was useful. The second call was to her own attorney. Because here was the thing Wren did not know. The thing hidden in subsection 4C of the donor agreement, in the data sharing clause that Sloan Merritt had called standard boilerplate under the clinic's original founding documents. Thus, any legal proceeding involving a donor connected to Ashford Fertility could trigger a review clause that implicated the clinic's co-owners in the outcome. If Cole were established as a legal father, even involuntarily, Petra could use that to revisit asset terms from their divorce settlement. The clinic's valuation had changed significantly. She had been underpaid. She had been patient about it. She was done being patient. This was never about the child. This was about the building Petra had built and what she was owed for it. She set her phone on her desk. Outside her window, Boston moved through its October evening without awareness of any of this. She had all the time in the world. She opened her laptop and began to draft. Wren found out on a Tuesday, in the worst possible way. She was 16 weeks pregnant, sitting in Dr. Nair's waiting room for a routine check, scrolling her phone with the distracted focus of someone who answers emails between everything else. The notification came from a news alert she'd set for the clinic's name. A habit from her forensic work, monitoring any litigation involving structures she touched. Investigative report. Ashford fertility and 3 years of concealed data errors. By Zara Quinn, Boston Chronicle. She read the headline twice. Then the article. The data migration error. 11 confirmed cases. Donor records cross-referenced incorrectly. The IT employee, unnamed, per source request, who discovered it and was fired. The NDA. The internal emails from Desmond Holt directing staff to manage this at the source level. And at the bottom of the article, a detail that turned the waiting room cold around her. The donor in case number 7, a known donor arrangement, had been publicly identified through a procedural filing. Case number 7. The name printed there was Cole Devereaux. Her phone buzzed. Then again. A notification from Sloan. Call me immediately. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Calloway, my name is Zara Quinn. I'd like to speak with you. And then, 3 seconds later, a call from Cole himself. She answered. You saw it, she said. I'm so sorry, he said. I had no idea my name was in any filing. I'm calling my attorney right now. Who's filing? She said. Her voice was very steady. She had learned to make her voice very steady when her internal systems were registering catastrophic failure. A pause. I don't know yet, he said. But she heard something in his voice. An edge of recognition he wasn't ready to name. She had been in this work long enough to know what a building looked like right before the structural system gave. Find out, she said. Today. She hung up. Dr. Nair's assistant appeared in the doorway. Wren stood, gathered her things, walked toward the examination room with her shoulders straight and her hands perfectly still, and the specific, cold, clarifying anger of a woman who has built everything carefully and is watching someone else take a match to it. He called her office on a Wednesday morning with the smooth confidence of a man who had managed crises before and expected to manage this one. Ms. Calloway. Desmond Holt's voice was warm, practiced, the vocal equivalent of expensive stationery. I want to personally reach out before this becomes something neither of us wants it to be. What do you want, Mr. Holt? A conversation, discreet, productive. A pause. We're prepared to offer a resolution that fully addresses any concerns you may have about data handling with a meaningful financial component. I'm authorized to discuss $500,000 in exchange for a confidentiality agreement that... You want to buy my silence, Wren said. I want to protect your privacy and your child's. She looked at the view from her Atlantic Avenue office. The waterfront. A cargo ship moving slowly across the harbor. She thought about what silence costs, about every person who had signed Desmond's NDAs before her, the 11 cases, the families who had taken his checks and disappeared into quiet. I'll need to think about it, she said. Of course, take the week. She hung up and immediately called Sloan. He offered $500,000 to go away. Don't sign anything, Sloane said instantly. I'm not going to. A pause. But I need to know exactly what we're dealing with before I decide what to do instead. That evening, she called Bishop. She hadn't called her brother in 6 weeks. Their relationship had the specific warmth and infrequency of two people who love each other and live parallel lives. He picked up on the third ring, his voice carrying something she recognized only in retrospect as anticipation. "Wren," he said. "You worked at Ashford Fertility," she said. Not a question. She had found his employment history in the article. Unnamed, but the timeline matched perfectly when she looked. "You were the IT employee." A very long silence. "Yes," he said. "Bishop." Her voice broke the single syllable into something careful and enormous. "What do you have?" "Everything," he said quietly. "I've had it for 3 years. I was waiting for a reason big enough." She pressed her hand against her abdomen. The baby moved. A small, definitive flutter. The first time she'd felt it clearly. "This is it," she said. "This is the reason." The document arrived at Sloane's office on a Friday morning. A petition for establishment of legal paternity, filed in Suffolk County Family Court. Cole Nathaniel Devereaux, respondent. Represented by Petra L. Ashford Devereaux, Esquire. Sloane read it once, then again. Then she called Wren. "She's his ex-wife," Sloane said, "and she's a co-owner of the clinic." Wren sat at her kitchen table in the Marlborough Street apartment. Morning light, coffee untouched. "Why?" she said. Sloane walked her through it. The review clause in the original founding documents, the divorce settlement, the clinic's changed valuation. "This isn't about the child," Sloane said. "If Cole is established as a legal father, Petra can use that proceeding to trigger a financial review of the clinic's assets at time of divorce. She believes she was underpaid. This is how she collects." "She's using my baby as a legal instrument," Wren said. "Yes." The specific quality of the silence that followed was the kind that precedes very clear decisions. "She co-owns the clinic that hid the data breach," Wren said. "Which means she knew. She had access to the system. I can prove that from the public filing. She knew about the error. She knew about Bishop. She knew about me. Wren, she chose me." The words arrived with a cold, architectural precision. She saw Cole's file. She saw my application. She let it proceed because she needed a case, a specific case with a known donor she could still access. She chose me because I was useful. Sloane was quiet for a moment. "If you can prove that." "Bishop has 3 years of documentation on what that clinic did," Wren said. "Every internal email, every directive from Desmond Holt, every file that was altered." She stood up, walked to the window. "And I'm a forensic architect. Finding structural failure in systems people tried to hide. That is exactly what I do." She turned away from the window. "I'll call the attorney for the class action," she said. "Tell them we have new evidence, and get me a meeting with Zara Quinn." She had spent her career reading ruins. She knew how they were built, stone by stone, decision by decision. She knew that the people who caused them always left traces. Petra Ashford Devereaux had left a great many traces. The account freeze came on a Tuesday. A preliminary court order, requested by Petra's legal team on the grounds of a disputed asset review tangentially connected to the paternity filing, had triggered a hold on Wren's primary account pending clarification. It was procedurally thin. It would likely be reversed within 2 weeks. But in the immediate present, Wren had $412 in an accessible account. A mortgage on a Marlborough Street apartment, Mocher and a forensic architecture practice whose largest contract had just been paused by a client who'd seen the news coverage and wanted to wait for clarity. She was 18 weeks pregnant. Her back ached in a low, persistent way that Dr. Nair said was normal. But that felt, at 2 in the morning, like the world pressing down from below. She sat on the floor of her kitchen, not dramatically, just because the floor was cool and solid and the chair had stopped feeling sufficient. And she made another list. Left column, what she had. Right column, what she needed. Left column was short, $400. Bishop's hard drive. Sloan. Cole's signed statement that he had not authorized Petra's filing. The class action attorneys, who were now very interested in talking to her. Right column was longer. She did not cry. She had not cried since the day the doctors told her about her fertility timeline. That day, alone in her car in the clinic parking lot, she had allowed herself 12 minutes. She had set a timer. When it ended, she wiped her face and drove home and opened her laptop. She picked up her phone. She opened the contact she'd saved as CD because she had refused, for 3 months, to save it as anything more personal than initials. She typed, "The account freeze happened. I'm managing. I wanted you to know because you deserve to know what's happening." The reply came in 4 minutes. "I'm booking a flight. Don't tell me not to." She stared at the message. She typed, "I wasn't going to." She put the phone down, put her hand on her abdomen. The baby, her daughter, though she hadn't told anyone the gender yet, he hadn't told anyone anything she didn't have to, moved in the small, certain way that had started to feel like punctuation. "We're going to be okay," Wren said, not out loud. She got up off the floor. She made tea. She opened her laptop. She went back to work. He arrived from Portland with a rolling carry-on and an external hard drive in his jacket pocket, and the specific expression of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and has finally found the doorstep to set it down on. Bishop Calloway was 39. He had his sister's eyes and none of her stillness. He was kinetic, quick, the kind of person who thought out loud and solved problems by talking at them. He had been an IT systems architect before Ashford Fertility. Then he had worked remotely for a small company in Portland and had not spoken publicly about any of it, and had paid his therapist every other Tuesday, and had kept the hard drive in a fireproof box under his bed. He sat at Wren's kitchen table and plugged the drive into his laptop and turned the screen to face her. "This is everything," he said. "Internal communications from January through August 3 years ago. The original error report I filed. The response from Desmond Holt, in writing, in email, directing the records team to reintegrate the affected files without notation. The NDA they handed me. The termination letter." He scrolled. "And this." He stopped on an email thread. Wren leaned in. The thread was between Desmond Holt and a legal contact. The subject line was, Ashford co-owner awareness. She read it, and her face went very still. "Petra knew," she said. "She was copied on this email the week after the error was discovered," Bishop said. She replied 4 words. "Handle it. Keep quiet." Wren sat back. The room was completely quiet. "She's been sitting on this for 3 years," Wren said. "While running a fertility clinic where patients trusted her," Bishop said. "While letting 11 families make decisions based on compromised records. While waiting for a moment she could use it." "And then I walked in," Wren said. "And then you walked in," he agreed. Wren looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked at her brother. He had dark circles under his eyes and a day of stubble, and the particular relief of a person finally in the right room. "You kept this for 3 years," she said. I kept it for a reason, he said. I just didn't know what the reason was yet. She reached across the table and gripped his hand once, briefly. Now we do, she said. Zara Quinn had been threatened by Desmond Holt's attorneys twice since her article published. She was 34, a Chronicle investigative reporter who had spent 8 years building a reputation for going where the paper trail went, regardless of where it terminated. She was also currently managing a defamation threat from Ashford Fertility's legal team that her editor described as aggressive but winnable, and her own attorney described as expensive either way. She had not regretted writing the article. She did not regret things she'd reported accurately. Wren called her on a Thursday afternoon. Zara answered because she always answered unknown numbers. You didn't do this work and screen calls. I'm Wren Calloway, Wren said. Case number 7. A pause. I've been hoping you'd call, Zara said. They met at a coffee shop in Cambridge, neutral ground, away from Beacon Street, away from anyone who might recognize either of them. Wren came with Sloane. Zara came alone. Yellow legal pad on the table, pen uncapped. Wren placed a USB drive on the table between them. That's a copy of Bishop Calloway's hard drive, Wren said. He was the IT employee your source referred to. He is my brother. He has 3 years of internal Ashford communications documenting the error, the cover-up, and the directive from Desmond Holt. He also has an email chain showing Petra Ashford Devereaux was informed within the week and responded with instructions to suppress it. Zara did not touch the drive yet. Gary, why are you giving this to me? Because you already started something, Wren said. Because 11 families deserve to know the full story. And because I'm not in a position to fight 2 legal battles simultaneously while pregnant. But you can run the story that makes the second battle unnecessary. Zara looked at the drive, then at Wren. If this is what you say it is, the defamation case against me collapses. The liability to Ashford becomes massive. Yes. And Desmond Holt loses everything. That's the idea. Zara picked up the drive. She turned it in her fingers once, the way a journalist does when they're holding something they already know is going to change the shape of a story they thought they understood. You came in here ready, Zara said. I'm a forensic architect, Wren said. I don't walk into a structure until I understand its failure points. Zara made a note. Then she looked up. I'm in, she said. He confronted Petra on a Saturday in the lobby of her office building on State Street. He hadn't called ahead. He knew if he called ahead, she'd manage it, arrange the meeting on her terms, in her space, with her particular talent for making a room feel like a courtroom where she'd already prepared her closing argument. He arrived at 10 and waited until she walked through the door at 10:40, which was when she always arrived on Saturdays. He knew her schedule. 5 years of marriage builds knowledge you don't always want. She saw him and did not flinch. He had always respected that about her, even now. She assessed, calculated, and walked toward him with the calm of a person deciding how to manage a variable. Cole, she said, this isn't appropriate. You filed a legal action using my name without my consent, he said. Tell me what's appropriate. They stood in the marble lobby. Her assistant held the elevator. She waved it away with 2 fingers. I filed to protect your rights, she said. That's not what you did. His voice was quiet. She had always underestimated how dangerous quiet was on him. She had mistaken it for passivity. You used a paternity petition to trigger your divorce settlement review clause. The child, Petra. You used a child who isn't born yet as a legal mechanism. Something moved across her face, not guilt, but the brief exposure of the calculation beneath the warmth she performed. The settlement was unfair. I'm the clinic's value. I know what you think you're owed, he said. I also know you've known about the data breach for 3 years and said nothing. I have the email. She went very still. I'm withdrawing my authorization for your representation, he said. Today. My attorney is filing the motion this afternoon. He held her gaze. And Wren Calloway has Bishop's hard drive, and she's already talked to Zara Quinn. Whatever you thought you were building, it's done. She opened her mouth. We were wrong for each other, he said, quieter now. I knew it, and I let the good years distract me. But I'm clear now. I'm completely clear. He left. He walked out into the Boston morning, called his attorney from the sidewalk, and felt something in his chest loosen that had been tightened for longer than he'd admitted. He texted Wren. Done. A motion filed this afternoon. I'm sorry it took me this long to be clean about it. Her reply, you're clean now. That's what counts. She went into preterm labor at 32 weeks. It began at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday with back pain that shifted. She recognized the shift instantly, had memorized the clinical literature on exactly this, and became rhythmic, then urgent, then undeniable. She called Dr. Nair, then Sloan, then Cole. He was in Boston. He'd been in Boston for 2 weeks, working from a sublet in the South End, present in the way she had stopped pretending not to need. He picked up on the first ring and was at her door in 9 minutes. Massachusetts General admitted her within 40 minutes. Dr. Nair moved with the efficient calm of someone who had prepared for this contingency. The baby was early, and the next 12 hours would determine what early meant. They slowed the contractions. They bought time. Wren signed 3 documents from the hospital bed: the class action co-plaintiff agreement, a sworn statement for Zara's follow-up article, and a motion Sloan had prepared. She signed them between monitoring checks, pen steady, jaw set. You don't have to do those tonight, Sloan said from the visitor's chair. The deposition window closes Thursday, Wren said. I'll do them tonight. Cole was in the chair beside the bed. He did not tell her to slow down. He did not manage her. He handed her the pen when she needed it, and held her hand when she reached for it, and got her ice chips from the hall at 4 a.m. without being asked, and said nothing that was not worth saying. At 6 a.m., and when the contractions had stabilized and Nair confirmed the baby was safe for now, Wren lay back against the pillow and looked at the ceiling. The room was gray with early light. Boston beginning outside. Cole, she said. Yeah. I need you to know that I did not plan for you to matter this much. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. I didn't plan it either. She turned her head and looked at him. He looked tired and wholly present, entirely himself. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. The baby held. The morning came. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary, irreplaceable Wednesday, knowing nothing about any of this. He testified on a Thursday before a Suffolk County Family Court magistrate in a proceeding that was supposed to be about a paternity petition and had become something significantly larger. Bishop Calloway sat across from the bench in a dark blazer. Wren had made him buy it, which was the most like her old self she had seemed in weeks, and answered every question with the methodical clarity of a man who had rehearsed this moment, privately, for 3 years. The hard drive's contents had been authenticated by a digital forensics firm the class action attorneys retained. The emails were verified. The metadata confirmed dates. The chain of directive from Desmond Holt was documented across 16 emails spanning 4 months. Petra Ashford Devereaux's forward reply, handle it. Keep quiet, was there, time-stamped, unaltered. Bishop was not emotional on the stand. He was precise. He had learned from his sister that precision was a form of respect for the truth, that the facts, stated clearly, did not need ornamentation. Mons, the magistrate, reviewed the materials during a 90-minute recess. When she returned, she was very calm in the specific way that judges are calm when they have made a decision and are about to impose it cleanly. The original donor agreement between Wren Calloway and Cole Devereaux was confirmed as binding. Petra's petition was dismissed with prejudice. The magistrate's written order, issued the following day, contained a formal referral to the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers regarding Petra's conduct and a separate referral to the State Medical Board regarding Desmond Holt. Wren received the news by phone, lying in the hospital bed at 34 weeks, with Cole beside her and Margot's heartbeat steady on the monitor beside the bed. She read the ruling twice. Then she handed the phone to Cole. He read it. He looked at her. "Art, it's over," he said. "The first part," she said. He understood what she meant. The legal part, the structural failure, read and named. The rest, Desmond, Petra, the 11 families, the clinic's future, was still moving through its own systems. But the part that was about her daughter? Over. She took Cole's hand. She looked at the monitor. Margot's heartbeat was steady, strong, unhurried. The sound of a person absolutely committed to arriving. "Not long now," Wren said, quietly to both of them. She asked for the appearance herself. Sloan had arranged for written submissions, standard procedure for a client in modified bed rest at 35 weeks. Wren read the briefs, called Sloan at 8 on a Monday morning and said, "I want to be there in person." "Wren, I want to say it myself," she said. "Not through a brief. Not through you, and not because I don't trust you. Because this is my case and my daughter, and I'm not going to let the last thing this court hears from me be a document." Sloan was quiet for 2 seconds. "I'll clear it with Nair." Nair approved with conditions. No more than 3 hours out, no standing, water within reach. Cole drove her. Sloan met them at the courthouse on Pemberton Square with 2 extra copies of everything and the expression of someone who has stopped trying to outprepare Wren Calloway. Petra was already seated at the respondents' table when they came in. She looked up. Something moved across her face, surprise quickly managed. She had not expected Wren to be present. She had been counting on the brief. Wren sat. She arranged her materials. She looked straight ahead. When the magistrate called on her, she stood slowly, deliberately, one hand on the table, and she spoke. She did not perform emotion. She stated facts. The data breach, the suppression, the email, the filing that had used her unborn daughter as a trigger mechanism in a financial dispute. She spoke about Bishop losing his job for telling the truth, about 11 families making life decisions based on compromised records, about a co-owner of a fertility clinic who had typed 4 words, "Handle it, keep quiet," and then built a legal strategy on the damage she had helped create. Her voice did not waver. She spoke for 11 minutes. When she was done, she sat down. The courtroom was very quiet. Petra's attorney rose and said 3 sentences. They were insufficient. Everyone in the room could feel that they were insufficient. Where the magistrate looked at Wren for a moment, not with pity, with something closer to recognition. "Thank you, Ms. Calloway," she said. 3 days later, the ruling came. Wren read it on her phone in the Marlborough Street apartment, morning light across the kitchen table, Cole on the couch with Margot's last ultrasound photo on his phone. She didn't say anything. She turned the phone to face him. He read it. He looked up. "You won," he said. "We won," she said. Zara Quinn's second article ran on a Thursday morning at 6 a.m. It was 2,200 words. It had a photograph of the clinic's Beacon Street entrance. It had a detailed timeline of the data breach, the cover-up, the emails, the NDA, and the names of all 11 affected families, those who had agreed to be identified. It quoted Bishop Calloway by name for the first time, and it quoted the class action's lead attorney. It quoted the court's referral order verbatim. It did not quote Petra Ashford Devereaux or Desmond Holt, because neither had responded to 3 days of requests for comment. The article went live at 6. By 8, it was the most read piece on the Chronicle's site. By 10, 3 national outlets had picked it up. By noon, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office had issued a statement confirming an investigation into Ashford Fertility's data practices. Desmond Holt did not go to his office that Thursday. His assistant sent an email saying he was unavailable. By Friday afternoon, the clinic's board had placed him on administrative leave pending the investigation. By the following Monday, he had retained a criminal defense attorney. The clinic closed its patient intake temporarily. A court-appointed monitor was assigned to review records. The 11 families were contacted by the state. Zara Quinn received a call from the National Press Foundation the following week, asking whether the reporting had been submitted for consideration. She said it had not, and then she submitted it. Wren read the article on her phone while sitting on the edge of her bed. She was 36 weeks. Margot was practicing breathing. Dr. Nair had shown her on the last ultrasound the small rhythmic movement of a person preparing. She had her hand on her abdomen while she read. When she finished, she set the phone down. She thought about Bishop in that parking lot 3 years ago, signing an NDA with shaking hands because he needed the money and had no other option, and believed, as a practical matter, that he was powerless. She thought about what it cost people to be quiet about things they should not have to be quiet about. She texted him, "It's done. You did that." His reply, "We did that." She put the phone on the nightstand. She lay back. Outside, Boston moved through its ordinary Thursday, without knowing that several things had just been permanently corrected. It did not happen all at once. Ruin rarely does. The bar overseer's investigation was opened within 10 days of the magistrate's referral. Petra responded through her own counsel, which was the first indication that she understood the situation had moved outside her control. Petra Ashford Devereaux had spent 15 years being her own counsel. The fact that she needed someone else now was its own verdict. The investigation was thorough, and the petition she had filed, without fully disclosing her conflict of interest as Cole's ex-wife and as a co-owner of the implicated clinic, was documented in detail. The timeline established that she had known about the data breach. The 4-word email was now part of the public record. In the 3rd week, the divorce court agreed to reopen the asset proceedings, but not in Petra's favor. The new valuation of the clinic, adjusted for the regulatory penalties and the reputational collapse, was significantly lower than at time of divorce. The settlement she had been trying to revise upward was revised downward instead. The review clause she had tried to weaponize had been turned, in the hands of Cole's attorney, into the instrument of her own reckoning. She lost the stake she'd been fighting to recover. She lost her access to the clinic she'd co-founded. She lost, within 6 months, her standing at her firm, not fired, but eased toward the exit with the particular gentleness that institutions deploy when a liability needs to be managed quietly. She was still a talented attorney. She would practice somewhere, eventually, in some diminished capacity. She was not destroyed. She was permanently reduced, which is a different and sometimes more accurate consequence. What she had wanted was the thing she'd built. The clinic, the asset, the proof that she had made something worth more than she'd been paid for it. She had wanted to be right about what she was owed. She had been right. The clinic was worth more, but the way she had tried to collect had cost her the building itself. Cole heard about the bar investigation from his attorney and said nothing specific about it. What he said, after a long silence, was, "I hope she finds some peace eventually." He meant it. That was the thing about him. He meant the things he said, even the hard ones. Wren said nothing. She had named the failure. She had let the structure speak. That was enough. She was born on a Friday at 4:17 in the afternoon, in a room full of March light. Dr. Nair had described the light that particular week as something she noticed every year. The way March in Boston did something in late afternoon that no other month replicated. A low gold angle that turned hospital rooms briefly warm and unhospital-like, as if the season were trying to soften the occasion. Margot arrived furious and entirely certain, after 8 seconds of silence, and then a declaration that filled the room completely. Small and absolute. She had her mother's forehead and Cole's hands, and the specific quality, already visible, of a person who had strong opinions about her own presence. Wren held her against her chest and did not try to hold back the tears. She had been doing that less in recent months, a change she attributed to necessity and which had turned out to be something closer to growth. She pressed her lips to the top of Margot's head. The world rearranged itself permanently around that fact. Cole was beside the bed. His steadiness had given way at the edges to something more undone, more honest than steadiness. And he held it without apology. When Wren looked up at him, his eyes were bright. "Do you want to hold her?" Wren asked. He nodded once. He didn't trust his voice. He held Margot with the instinctive competence of hands that knew how to support growing things. She quieted almost immediately, turned her face toward the warmth of him, blind and certain. 3 weeks later, Margot came home to the Marlborough Street apartment. Cole was there. He had been there for the hospital hours and the first hard week, and would be there for the weeks following, working remotely, sleeping on the couch when Wren needed the room, and in the room when she didn't. Navigating the early weeks of a new life, with the patient attentiveness of a man who understood that growing things required consistency more than grand gestures. Bishop came from Portland for the weekend. He held Margot for 2 hours straight and talked to her about plants. Yet Wren watched her brother with her daughter in the afternoon light of the apartment she had built carefully and alone, and which was, she was finding, large enough for everything that had arrived. She had only wanted a child. She had gotten so much more than she'd known how to ask for. 3 months after Margot came home, Wren said it first. They were on the couch on a Sunday evening, Margot asleep in the bassinet in the corner of the room. The apartment quiet the way it gets when a baby has just settled, and both adults have stopped holding their breath, and the city outside has dialed to its late-night register. Cole had been reading a book about native plantings in urban New England climates that he left on her shelf 3 weeks ago. Wren had been reviewing specs on her laptop, the Seaport project back on track. With the client's confidence restored after the investigation had clarified the clinic had nothing to do with her professional record. She looked up from the screen. She looked at him. "I love you," she said. She said it the way she said true things. Directly, without softening it into something smaller, without the performance of certainty she sometimes used to mask the actual feeling. He looked up from the book. He looked at her for a moment with an expression she had learned to read in the months since the hospital hallway. Deeper than the easy warmth, something more permanent underneath. Then, very quietly, he smiled. "I know," he said. "I've known for a while." "Since when?" "Since you told me organization was efficient and I realized you were the most remarkable person I'd met in years." He closed the book, and I was waiting for you to be ready to say it. You could have said it first, she said. You would have needed time to verify it independently, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, That is extremely accurate. He laughed. She did too. A full, unguarded laugh that surprised her with its ease, the way good things do when you've spent long enough expecting them to cost more than they do. Margot stirred in the bassinet. Both of them went still. The baby resettled, made one small certain sound, and was quiet again. They looked at each other in the lamplight. Stay, Wren said. Not on the couch. Stay. He reached over and took her hand with the same unhurried ease he brought to everything. No performance, no gesture larger than the moment required. I already put tomato seeds in your terrace planter, he said. She looked at him. When? Last week. The early season variety. They'll be up by April. She turned back to the laptop. She closed it. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Outside, Boston moved through its December night, indifferent and alive, carrying everyone's story simultaneously and distinguishing between none of them. This one, though. This one was something. 1 year later, on a Saturday in April, Wren Calloway married Cole Devereaux in the backyard of a house in Concord that belonged to Sloan Merritt's family and which had, at the back of the garden, a greenhouse. There were 22 people. No venue rental, no photographer's assistant with a drone, no seating chart distributed by email 3 weeks in advance. There was afternoon light and a garden that had begun to bloom. And Margot in a white dress being held by Bishop, who had, at the age of 39, turned out to be extraordinary with a 1-year-old. Wren wore ivory, a dress from a designer on Charles Street, simple and right. She had chosen it alone one morning, quickly, the way she made decisions she was certain of. The ceremony was short and specific. They had written their own words. Cole spoke first, about gardens and patience, and the specific kind of faith required to plant something without knowing exactly what it would become. Wren spoke second, about structural integrity, about how the strongest buildings are not the ones built without compromise, but the ones built from honest materials, where every load-bearing element knows what it's carrying and holds it truthfully. And she had never been so precise about anything that wasn't architecture. And she had never meant anything more than she meant this. Zara Quinn received her Press Foundation nomination the week before the wedding. Bishop won his wrongful termination suit against Ashford Fertility. The settlement was confidential, but his attorney told him it was substantial. The class action for the 11 families reached a resolution in February. Full disclosure, medical monitoring, and an amount the lead attorney called appropriate. Desmond Holt pled no contest to 3 counts of regulatory fraud. Ashford Fertility was sold and rebranded under new ownership. Margot took her first steps in the greenhouse between 2 rows of tomatoes on a Tuesday in March. Cole was there. Wren got it on video, slightly blurred because her hands were shaking, and sent it to Bishop and Sloan and Zara and Nair, who replied with 3 exclamation points, which was unlike her and perfect. What Wren had wanted, 14 months ago, walking through a clinic door with a 3-inch folder and a plan and a very tight chest, was a child. She had gotten Margot. She had gotten Cole. Bishop restored. Zara. Sloan. The work rebuilt. The truth told. She had gotten everything she was owed, and several things she hadn't known to ask for. On the drive home from Concord, Margot asleep in the car seat, Cole's hand on hers on the center console, the April evening doing something gold and unreasonable with the light across the highway, Ren looked out the window and let herself feel it, fully, without the timer, without the category. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was finally and completely hers. And just like that, the story is over, my friends. And if you're still here with us right now, I want you to really sit with that for a second. Because if you made it all the way to the end, something in Ren's story found you. Maybe it was the moment she signed documents from a hospital bed. Maybe it was Bishop holding onto that hard drive for 3 years, waiting for a reason big enough. Or maybe it was simply a woman who refused to collapse under the weight of everything stacked against her. The Stoics had a word for this. Amor fati, love your fate. Not blind acceptance, not giving up, but taking everything thrown at you, okobusai, the betrayal, the loneliness, the fear, and choosing to build something real from the wreckage anyway. And Ren didn't just survive what happened to her. She read the structure of it, found every failure point, and rebuilt on ground that actually held. And that's the quiet, powerful truth this story leaves us with. The people who try to use your vulnerability as a weapon are only telling you how afraid they are of your strength. If this story moved you, please give it a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so we never miss each other again. This is an original work of fiction created entirely for entertainment and storytelling purposes. All characters, including Ren Calloway, Cole Devereaux, Petra Ashford Devereaux, Desmond Holt, Bishop Calloway, Zara Quinn, and Margot, are completely fictional and do not represent any real individuals, living or deceased. All institutions, clinics, legal proceedings, and events depicted in this story are purely fictional and have been created solely to serve the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, organizations, real events, or specific legal or medical situations is entirely coincidental. This story explores themes of betrayal, resilience, legal conflict, and personal rebuilding, and is intended as emotional dramatic fiction, not factual reporting, journalism, or legal advice. This channel produces original dramatic fiction narratives for mature audiences. We do not claim that any portrayed events occurred in real life. Viewer discretion is advised for themes involving personal conflict and emotional distress. Thank you for supporting original creative storytelling.